Hey everyone, welcome back from spring break. This is Miss Gillum. We are going to go through the Walk the Line Part 2 review. I hope you're ready. I hope you've already tried to do the review on your own and that we are just going to go through and review and see if you have any questions that still need to be answered. So let's make sure we're ready before we actually start the video. Make sure you have your review with you, a pencil in case you need to fix anything on your review, and maybe a highlighter. Highlight any important things that I tell you to look at in the problems. Now that you have everything you need for the review, let's get started. Let's first start by remembering that there are two different sets of rules for adding, subtracting, and multiplying and dividing. We're going to call these worlds. They're in two separate worlds. So in the first world, we have adding and subtracting. Adding likes to stay at the top. They're in their own worlds. And then subtraction likes to stay at the bottom until it does keep, change, and then it can move to the top. And then the rules that apply for adding and subtracting are same sign, you find the sum. But if they're different signs, you're going to find the difference. Sorry, I kind of ran out of room in my circles. Okay, so same signs, you find the sum, add them together. Different signs, we find the difference. But multiplying and dividing get along really well. They live in the same world. There's no need for a sign because their rules are the same. That if it is same sign, the answer is a positive. Different signs, the answer is a negative. Okay, so let's do an example. If I had -5 times -2, that'd be a positive 10. But if I had different signs, a -5 times a positive 2, my answer would be a negative 10. Same thing for division. If I had -15 divided by -3, I end up with a positive 5. But if I had a -15 divided by a positive 3, I'd end up with -5. But over here, with adding and subtracting, you have to think. If I have -5 plus -2, that would be a -7. Remember to think about money. Adding and subtracting is all about money. Okay, but if I had -5 minus a -2, that's the same thing as saying -5 plus a positive 2, which would be their different signs, so I take the difference, which would be a -3. Now let's take a look at order of operations. There's two different sayings. You could say GEMDAS, so G, E, M, and D go together. Adding and subtracting go together. Okay, G represents grouping, which can be parentheses, it can be absolute value, it can be brackets. E is for exponents. And then we have multiplication and division, and they go left to right. And then we have adding and subtracting, and these also go left to right. One of them is not more important than the other. Next we have, I left a line that says absolute value is always positive. Okay, so let's do an example of what I mean by that. So if I had the absolute value of -4, the answer would be positive 4. Or if I had the absolute value of 5, it would still be a positive 5 because it's how far away it is from 0. Okay, but remember, sometimes you may have a problem inside, like -3 plus -2. So you know that is the absolute value of -5, which is going to end up as a 5. Okay, now we are on to multiplying and dividing integers. Evaluate each of the following expressions. This actually should say equations because they have equal signs. So a quick way to help you remember if the answer should be positive or negative if you're still struggling with that, but this only works with multiplying and dividing, so I'm going to put that in the middle. If I have a positive times a negative, my answer is negative. If I have a negative times a negative, my answer is positive. So you just have to start wherever your first number is and follow the sequence. And it will tell you what your answer should be. So let's try it on this one. So we have negative 32 divided by a negative 4. Well, I know 32 divided by 4 is 8, but I need to check what sign. A negative divided by a negative makes a positive, okay? So then I have 7 times 7, which is 49. And then I have a positive times a negative, so my final answer should be negative. So I'm going to put a negative 49 there. And then I have negative 3 times negative 12 is going to give me a positive 36. A negative and a negative, same signs, so it's positive. Okay, now this next one we have 3 things to multiply. So the way I do this is I do the first 2, because remember you do multiplication division left to right. Negative 2 times a negative 4 is going to give me a positive 8. So I have 8 times negative 5, and then 8 times negative 5 is going to give me a negative 40. Okay, and you can always do your triangle, and a positive times a negative gives me a negative. Okay, next I have negative 15 divided by, remember these fractions just mean that it is division. It can be rewritten as negative 15 divided by 3. So that's going to give me a negative 5 because I have a negative divided by a positive, different signs. Okay, this next one, we have on top, we have negative 3 times a negative 4, which gives me 12, a positive 12 divided by 6, which will end up giving me 2. Okay, we are still looking at multiplying positive and negative integers, but we're also going to add in these absolute values. Remember, when you have these straight lines, that is absolute value. So the first one we have is negative 4, the absolute value of negative 4 times the absolute value of 5. And we talked about how absolute value is actually grouping. So we need to take care of absolute value before we can multiply. So the absolute value of negative 4 is going to be a positive 4 times the absolute value of 5, which is 5, which actually gives me a 20. And it's a positive 20. Next, we have the absolute value of negative 6 divided by 2. And we talked about, once again, these absolute value signs are grouping. So we need to do the inside first. So I have the negative 6 divided by 2 will give me a negative 3. And then the absolute value of negative 3 is going to be a positive 3. Okay, next we have the absolute value of negative 9 times negative 3. So I have negative 9 times negative 3, so it's 27. So the absolute value of 27 is going to be 27. Okay, so now we're looking at order of operations. I have already wrote my GEMDOS to remind me to go in order of operations when I am solving. So let's look at this first problem. I'm actually going to rewrite it a little bigger so everybody can see it on their screen, whether they are on a computer or doing this on an iPad or their phone. Okay, so the first thing we need to check, do I have any grouping? Do I have any parentheses that have things inside of them? Yes, I do, right here. Here is my first grouping. So I need to do negative 4 plus a positive 2. So think about if you owe somebody $4, you give them 2, you're still going to owe them money. So I'm going to rewrite the rest of this. And so negative 4 plus a positive 2 is going to leave me at negative 2. Now I've got to look, so now I'm done with G. Do I have any exponents? No exponents. Now I'm going to do multiplying and dividing. Remember, this is left to right. So the first thing I'm going to take care of is this negative 5 times negative 6. So negative 5 times negative 6 is going to give me positive 30 divided by negative 2. Okay, so I'm done with that. Now I can do 30 divided by negative 2, which will give me a negative 15. Okay, so there's all that's done. There's no adding, subtracting. We are completely done with that problem. Okay, now on to question 2. So I'm going to write it bigger again. So I have 16 minus negative 18 divided by a negative 2. Remember, some of these parentheses are used only to tell you that the number's negative and not that it's actually a grouping of things. So we really don't have any parentheses that have something going on inside, so we can mark out the G. And then we don't have any exponents, so we can mark out E. And then we look, do I have multiplication or division? I don't have any multiplication, but I do have a division. I have negative 18 divided by a negative 2. So we need to take care of that first. So I'm going to rewrite 16 minus negative 18 divided by a negative 2 is going to give me a positive 9. So now I'm done there. Adding or subtracting, and no adding, so just subtract. 16 minus 9 is 7. So that would be my final answer. Okay, we are on the last problem of order of operations. So we have negative 25 plus 10 times 4 divided by a negative 2. So first thing, no grouping again, no exponents. So now multiplication, division, left to right. So first go through adding, oh, there's multiplication. It is the first thing on the left. So I'm going to do negative 25 plus 10 times 4 is 40 divided by a negative 2. Okay, next, once again, that we still are not done. We still have some division. So left to right, 40 divided by negative 2. So negative 25 plus, and then 40 divided by 2 is 20. And then one of them's, they're different signs, so my answer is negative. So done. And then we have adding, subtracting. So they're adding, same sign. So we just add them. Negative 25 plus a negative 20 makes a negative 45. You owe somebody $25 and you owe them 20, you borrowed 20 more, you owe them $45 now. Hang in there, guys. We're almost done. Keep working. You've got this. We are now looking at the coordinate plane. Things to remember about ordered pairs is that your x comes first and then your y. So remember, this is our x-axis, this is our y. You need to go through and label that. And then quadrants. Remember, we label our quadrants by making the letter C. So if I make the letter C, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's write that. This is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now let's write these points out. So A is right here. So it is at negative 6, 4. So negative 6, because that's the x, and then 4. And it is in quadrant 2. Next we have B. B is right here. It is at 5 and 3. So we write 5, 3, and it is in quadrant 1. C is down here, and it is at negative 5, negative 7. So I write negative 5, negative 7, and it is in quadrant 3. Next we have D. D is at 8, negative 2. So 8, negative 2, and that is in quadrant 4. Next we have E. E is right here on the x-axis. So it's at negative 7 on the x, but it doesn't move up or down, so that means it's at 0 on the y. So negative 7, 0, and we were going to say this is on the x-axis. It really doesn't fall in a quadrant. And then lastly, we have F, and F is right here. It's at 0 on the x, and it's up 6. So 0, 6, and this time we're going to say this one is on the y-axis. Okay, now we are solving the following inequalities for the solution. Remember, the one thing to remember about solving these inequalities is if you multiply or divide by a negative, we have to flip the sign. So first thing I want you to do is draw your line to separate the two sides. So this is -3 times x, so we are going to divide by -3 and divide by -3. -3 divided by -3 is a 1, so I have 1x, and we don't need to put the 1 in front because it's understood. And then positive 12 divided by -3 gives me a -4. Okay, here's a great way to remember. This was a positive, it flipped to a negative, so that means I need to flip this sign. Also, we divided by a negative right here, so that means we needed to flip that sign. And let's just practice graphing just in case it's on the test. I know I didn't say to graph it. We'll put -4 here. It would be an open circle going to the left to represent less than. Okay, next we have x divided by -8, so I'm going to draw my line. Okay, so if I'm dividing, that means I'm going to multiply by -8 and multiply by -8. These are going to cancel. So I have x, and then -6 times a -8 is going to give me a positive 48. And then we need to look if we need to flip. It was negative, it changed to a positive. And we also multiplied by a negative, so my sign needs to flip. Let's go ahead and graph this one as well. So put 48. This is also going to be an open circle, and it is going to greater numbers. Okay, last one of the inequalities. Draw your line. This is 5 times x, so I'm going to divide by 5. Divide by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1, gives me an x. -50 divided by 5 is a -10. Let's check. It was negative, it stayed negative, so my sign stays the same. So, and if I graph this, we have 10, 11, -10. This is -9 and -11. So this one's going to be a closed circle because you can't forget that line. And it's going to the less than side. Okay, we are on the last question. So the question says, which expression is equivalent to -6? So we have to remember what the word equivalent means. Equivalent has the word equal kind of hidden in it. And so I know it wants to know which one of these is equal to -6. So let's test them. So -3 times the -2 is a positive 6. So it can't be A. -12 divided by 2 is -6. Okay, so B is a possibility. -10, so I need to do keep, change here because it's subtracting. -10 plus positive 16. Oh, that makes a positive 6. Different sign, so I'd have to do 16 minus 10, which gives me that 6. And then -3 plus a positive 3 is going to be 0, so B is the answer because neither of those gave me a -6. You are going to do great on your test this week. I'm not worried about it at all. Take your time, go back and double check your answers, especially with the positives and negatives. Don't want to make silly mistakes. If you have any questions, come to tutorials. We will be more than happy to help any way we can.